Welcome to a live episode of Surviving the Survivor. We bring you the best guests in all of true crime. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button. Here's your host, Emmy Award-winning broadcaster, Joel Waldman.
What's up, STS Nation, and welcome to this episode of Surviving the Survivor, the podcast that promises to bring you the very best guests in all of true crime. And I'm trying to get myself awake here for the unusual 4 p.m. hour, and being the dope that I am, I had this show unlisted or private until about a minute ago. So right now we've got NC Saildown in our Dawn in our chat, and that's it. But people are going to be filing in here momentarily. That was my bad. It's been a crazy week. Someone is asking, have I been able to break into the studio? Yes, I have. Came to the studio last night. It was bolt locked shut. Speaking to some of my office mates, and we all took an FBI battering ram that Rob D'Amico gave us, and we broke it. No, we didn't really do that, but we got the bolt lock unlocked, and we are in the studio and ready to go. And we are going to be talking what else but Karen Reed. You're about to meet our new best guest, Uncivil Law Kurt Mueller, and he said he started this in week 4, and he said, and I quote, been one hell of a ride. Sounds like my life for 54 years. And this week has been particularly crazy, but we're all here. And I guess everyone's going to be ready to yell at each other once again over this Karen Reed trial, but hopefully things remain civil, even with uncivil law on the show. But for those of you who are living under a rock or on Mars with Elon Musk, back on January 29, 2022, Boston police officer John O'Keefe is found dead at a home at 34 Fairview Road, outside the home in Canton, Massachusetts. Long story short, a lot of people think Karen Reed hit fallen police officer John O'Keefe and killed him. Others think that it was a frame job, that other law enforcement officers who were out with him that night somehow got into a fight and perhaps killed him. And it has become incredibly divisive ever since then, as our chat is slowly starting to fill up. It's my bad, everyone in the chat. I had this. This is why you got to have the COE in charge and not me. I had this privately listed, and you see right here, Uncivil is here. What a great name for a YouTuber, but so is Note My Objection. And on our lower left of the screen is Katherine Loftus. She is a former assistant district attorney in the great state of Massachusetts, now a criminal defense attorney at Loftus and Loftus. This is her second time here. We love the way she says Arby's. The roast she says Abby's. Then we've got Uncivil Law. He is Kurt Mueller. He's an Austin-based lawyer. Houston now. I think I heard you say that. Houston. And he has a YouTube channel. It's a very successful one called Uncivil Law. If you haven't checked it out, check it out. You've got Rob D'Amico, retired FBI. He's now the head of Sierra One Consulting. He spent many, many decades in both the military and as an undercover agent for the FBI, catching pirates off the Somali coast. So he brings that expertise to the Karen Reed trial. We'll take what we can get. And last but certainly not least, Jennifer Roman, who's going to have to bounce early today. She's a partner at Tracy Roman and Ramos up in Boston. And she has been doing analysis for WBZ and WBZ Radio up in Boston about this case. Let's just go around the horn. Uncivil Law. You're dumb enough like me to step into this mud pile. Back, you said about 4 weeks in. What's the ride been like for you as a YouTuber covering this case and also as an attorney?
Well, it's certainly been interesting for sure, as I've watched the state do whatever it is that they're doing, because it's not presenting evidence or story or a cohesive thought. So whatever it is I'm watching, it's been interesting to watch, and my overall experience has been one of constant amazement that somehow every single day it somehow seems to get worse. It's like, I don't know how we can reach a new level, but somehow the state manages to find it every single day. And at this point, I have reasonable doubt that the Commonwealth exists. Their case is so weak. So it's been, yeah, that's where I'm at.
Jennifer Roman, you look slightly incredulous at those comments. Your reaction? I mean, I thought the Commonwealth scored some points. Here comes the hate mail. Earlier in the week with some of this forensic data that they had their expert witnesses discuss. And I'm not talking about Trooper Paul. I'm talking more about the fragments of tail found on the hoodie, etc. But do you agree with Kurt? Has this been a unmitigated disaster for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts?
I don't agree, and I think that the forensic evidence that recently, now, granted, we haven't heard from defense witnesses, right? So I don't know what they're going to come to the table with just yet. We'll see in a couple of days, hopefully. But I thought that the forensic evidence really buttoned up a lot of the loose ends for the prosecution. I mean, look, nobody picks their lay witnesses, their civilian witnesses, but you can pick your expert witnesses. And I thought that their expert witnesses really tied up a lot. I mean, for me, what was sort of the moment of like, okay, that evidence exists or doesn't exist was the DNA on the taillight, that John O'Keefe's DNA was on the taillight, that his hair, a piece of his hair was found inside on her rear quarter panel, that there were glass fragments on the bumper. And we all know that there's the video of him carrying the glass out of the waterfall, and pieces of the glass was found at the scene and now on her bumper. So I think that, and that they didn't find any DNA, any animal DNA on O'Keefe's body, which, you know, flies in the face of what the defense is trying to say. And we'll see if they're able to say it or not. So I thought that the forensics and then certainly the search, we'll hear from the defense expert about when that search, about how long the Dinah cold actually happened. But as of now, I think the prosecution made some real headway with the forensic and expert testimony they had earlier this week and late last week.
If you're joining the chat, please subscribe. If you like what you're watching, hit that like button, and I'll remind you of that yet again. Note my objection. Counselor Loftus, former ADA Loftus, just want you to weigh in generally. Do you think the Commonwealth did gain any ground with some of these experts as it pertains to forensic evidence, or are you with uncivil law on Kurt's side, where this is, again, just a massacre on the part of the Commonwealth, meaning that they are being massacred?
Well, I will tell you, I'm somewhere in the middle, which is usually the place I end up. And I seem to get the hate from both sides, because I think that what has happened throughout the pendency of this trial is that we have some ups and downs. You know, we're volleying back and forth. I agree that a lot of the evidence that we've been kind of waiting for, you know, as the Commonwealth presented their case, which is essentially the first part of it was, buttressing the third party culprit theory. And I think they spent so much time on that we were all waiting for what's the evidence, though, of either intent, of manslaughter, like where is it coming? And I do think that they started to gain a little bit more momentum until, if I'm being honest, I think that Trooper Paul, he had a really difficult time on the stand. And I think he did not do great on direct examination. I think he did even worse on cross-examination. And I also think that some of the problem with who's receiving this information, which is the jury, it often gets lost in the weeds because there's so much technical information. There's so much, sort of drama and chaos on the outskirts of this case that oftentimes, even though the Commonwealth seems to have some substance to their case, they're not presenting it in a persuasive way. I'm picking up on it. The lawyers pick up on it, but is a lay person, as a juror, picking up on it? I don't think so. So I think that, that method of presentation to the jury, coupled with, we're going to see the two experts who are the accident reconstructionists. We saw the voir dire of them on Tuesday. We're going to see them testify to the defense, and in contrast to the expert from the Commonwealth is going to be, I think, pretty significant for the jury. I don't know whether they get over it, but we shall see.
and we're going to get into the voir dire. So there was no court today. Just as a reminder, today is Juneteenth, which is basically when the Emancipation Proclamation was put into order.
It's when it reached Texas.
when it
The
reached
last place it reached in the United States. So the day that it reached the rest of the country. God bless Texas.
God bless Texas. Yes, indeed. God bless. And I need one of those cowboy hats when I finally meet you in person, Kurt. Obviously today, no court because it's a state holiday. I'm not sure if it's a federal holiday, but I know it's a state holiday in Massachusetts. It is a federal holiday. Okay, there you go. So it is a federal holiday. And then we're back tomorrow, and the Commonwealth should be winding its way very close to the finish line. Rob D'Amico, over the last week or so, with any of these forensic experts, has your opinion swayed in any way? I mean, you are retired FBI, so people in this chat are going to come after you as being one of the bad guys, but you're a good guy, and you've actually found a lot of flaws with the Commonwealth's case here.
Yeah, so one thing I want to point out, you said undercover, and then you said Somali pirates. I wasn't undercover against Somali pirates. I went undercover against the mob. The guy they wrote ended up writing Sopranos about, went against him. But
by the way, that's a whole other show that we're going to do called Surviving My Biggest Case. But
yeah, lived on a yacht and ran a nightclub in South Beach. But anyhow, when I look at the evidence, like you expect the expert witnesses to come in and they're going to side on it. I think it was fine testimony, but I don't think it's going to overcome the bad investigation. The fact that they found his DNA blood on the taillight, just then, well, was the crime scene even secured? Did they even have video footage of everyone who was in around the vehicle so that DNA wasn't planted? And I think that's what they're going to have a hard time coming over. Great, they had people come in to testify this, and this, but the investigation was so bad. And part of it, like there's no policy about having evidence logs before it gets into the main evidence room. I can't even comprehend that. I was looking through documents the other day, and I found all my evidence logs from the Somali pirate incidents. When I was in Somalia with the Samsonite luggage, I had every time I moved that between me and my partner or put it somewhere, I have logs everywhere that Samsonite luggage was and who was in charge of it. And they initialed it. So the fact that Massachusetts, troopers don't have a policy about that is crazy. So I don't think you can actually say that the evidence that they testified about is going to be seen as pure, because they have no recollection of who was around these vehicles and where everything was, to say that by the time we took it here, we have a person to testify that no one planted anything up until the day of, when we got the evidence. So I don't think they're going to be able to overcome that hurdle. And it's just based on a poor investigation. I do think that those experts came in and they qualified well. We're not putting Trooper Paul in that, because I think that was almost embarrassing again. And I think he is going to not only he did bad on direct and cross, but when defense is allowed to bring true experts in and how they testify, I think the comparison between the two is going to be so dramatic that nothing that he came up with, anyone is going to say that that's the way it happened. Oh, he admits he doesn't know how it happened because he wasn't there.
Right. From Four Cats, I'm not bringing the comment up because I want to get to this with Uncivil Law. Why bring people on your show who are lying? ? This witness is not being, it's a guest, by the way. It's not a witness. This isn't a courtroom we're in. The witness is not being truthful. The evidence displayed, I have no idea who this person, Four Cats, is talking about, but this is very much what everyone in this world deals with, in the Karen Reed world. I would just caution everyone to be a little more open-minded as we weave our way through this and get to the finish line. That is all I can say. And also, let us remember Officer John O'Keefe. He's at the center of this, and there's pretty much not a day that goes by where his name is not forgotten in all this. So it's always about Karen Reed. It's always about the circus atmosphere. So we should be mentioning John O'Keefe. And also, I should mention today at 6:00, my beloved mother, who I just wrote a book about. You see her face right behind me. She's going to be at a special wine event at the Citadel. If you're in Miami, at the Citadel, We're going to be there tonight, 6 o'clock. That's why we moved the show up a little bit. Two Uncivil Law, and then we'll get back to Jennifer Roman from Mel Ray. Two other people's DNA are found on John O'Keefe's jeans. Doesn't this lean to the defense theory of a fight? What does it do, in your opinion, legally here, Uncivil?
Yeah, I believe that's right. And I believe one of the other pieces of closing had even 3 or perhaps even more DNA that were unidentified. And one would want to know where that DNA came from, because it could lead to alternative explanations. I mean, the guy's presumably not walking around in clothing that just happens to have, other people's DNA on it. So the most Occam's razor sort of conclusion is that it would come from other people he came into contact that night in some sort of context. So you would want to know what that is if you're the government, for if no other reason, to be like, oh, okay, this is what it is, and this is how that DNA came to be. So we understand what that is, or present a theory. So, it leaves open real possibilities of alternative explanations that have not been sufficiently closed by the government.
Jennifer, to you, I don't know if you want to add to that about this blood DNA, I guess 2 other types found on the sweatshirt, but also here from anonymous Canadian girl, touch DNA and hair on his girlfriend's car is not proof of anything, and the glass didn't match. Uncivil shaking his head. What say you about this comment, Jennifer?
No, none of this in and of itself is proof of anything. Right? It's about the pieces of the puzzle and how they all fit together. And ultimately, did the Commonwealth prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt? And the trial isn't over. Prosecution's not done. Defense hasn't even gone yet. So, again, I'm keeping an open mind. I mean, I don't know ultimately what this evidence is going to show, but I do think that the prosecution did make some headway with their expert witnesses. Does it mean they've succeeded and met their burden yet? I don't think so. I think they've got a ways to go, but they still have a couple more witnesses to go, and we'll see what happens.
Yep. From what we're hearing, it's about another day or 2 at most for the Commonwealth. The medical examiner should be called tomorrow, I believe, and we'll get everyone's take on that. And then 4 days for the defense. So it is quite plausible that the jurors will get this in their hands late sometime next week. To note my objection, Ms. Counselor Loftus, Dream here says 82, but the glass on the bumper wasn't from the glass in question. I mean, I have been watching this trial day in and day out, and I got to tell you, I'm so confused about so many things, including these 45 pieces of taillight. But what about this notion that this glass had happened to stay on a bumper along with a hair for about 100-mile round trip and remain there? How do we explain that? How do you think the jury is looking at this right now?
Honestly, I think that there's a lot of evidence that, from my perspective, if we have sort of 2 competing theories, the jury often just doesn't really consider them, because this idea that the glass stayed on the back of the truck and the hair stayed on the back of the truck, we can just evaluate that through the lens of, common sense. I think there's a world where there's possible that the glass could stay there. It's, freezing cold, it's snowing, maybe it gets encased. I think the hair is a little bit stranger that it's one single strand of hair stayed on a vehicle that long. But then again, do I think it's, plausible that someone plucked a hair and planted it on there as well? I don't find that plausible to me either. So I do think that the thing about this trial is there's so much information and there's so much conflicting information that it just leaves what I think is the jury is probably as confused as they were in the very beginning of the case, because it really does seem to go up and down. I don't know where the glass comes from if it doesn't come from John. That's something that the Commonwealth hasn't explained. And so that leaves the question with the jury to figure out on their own.
I've never seen a case where, and maybe I'm just a dumb idiot, I don't know. I just very confused about a lot of the facts coming in, and it's been hard. It's been very hard to follow it, even watching this day to day. One of the things that obviously came into evidence through witness testimony and some of the digital forensics from the part of the Commonwealth, from witnesses from the Commonwealth, was this quote unquote all important 2:27 a.m. search, which is how long, how's long, how's long to die in the cold. And both two different digital forensic experts say that search was actually done after John O'Keefe's body was found. Rob D'Amico, that, in my opinion, is a point for the Commonwealth, but is it a point for the jurors, do you think?
I think so. There's so many technical things in that. And I would even have issues on both sides. Like I have a cyber company that I use, and the two people that are with me, former NSA, former agency folks. And I hear so much that only if those two told me, hey, I know it came at 227 or 627 when I believe it, because there's so many differences in cyber things. We had some overseas kidnapping cases, and on Messenger, when someone's on, it goes green. Well, the kidnapped person was going green, and their family saw it, and they would hit us up like they're on Facebook. And when we finally got down to it, Facebook sends out notifications to your last IP to see if you're there and all these other things, and it causes the Messenger to go green. And again, it took me probably a month to find someone in Facebook that could explain to me why this was happening, because no one else could. And it was a very detailed thing, but when you see it on the surface, it looks like one thing. And that's the way it is with technology, because all these things that go into it, and frankly, I can get an opinion almost on any case. I can go find an expert that says things. So I literally only believe the people in my company when I really have a question, say, did this really happen at this time and with these circumstances? And they tell me that because I know what their backgrounds are. So it's really tough for the jury. They're going to go both ways. I think it's going to be an opinion. Whatever expert witness they kind of have feel that this person really is that expert that they can believe. And it may be the last one that goes too, because it could be if the defense puts people on and they believe them kind of in the same light, and it's the last person they heard, I think that might overwin that.
And I think there's a lot of people. I mean, Jennifer, let me ask you this. A lot of people are wondering, because typically a medical examiner goes early on in a case, but here it's very possible the medical examiner is going to be the last person called. I think what we're waiting for with the Commonwealth right now is potentially some what people are anticipating to be maybe explosive voicemails, which would have to be very explosive. And then this medical examiner. Do you believe that the Commonwealth has something from that medical examiner that is, to use the phrase, a mic drop moment, and that, to Rob's point, is why they're saving the medical examiner for very last?
I'd be surprised if they had a mic drop moment with the medical examiner. I think all the medical examiner can really do is testify to the nature of the injuries, the trauma that was observed, and the cause of death. I mean, again, nobody was there except for Karen Reed, John O'Keefe, and perhaps some people in the house, right? We don't have anybody who actually witnessed this happen. So medical examiner doesn't have a crystal ball. They can only testify as to the consistency of the injuries and the trauma, right? And I'm interested in what Kathleen has to say, but it's kind of a stretch even for the medical examiner to say these injuries are consistent with pedestrian, being struck by a motor vehicle, because the injuries that can be caused by there's so many factors that can play into the injuries that somebody suffers, even if it's the same kind of crash happening, the same kind of collision. Where's the body positioned? How tall is the person? How much does the person weigh? What kind of vehicle struck them? There's so many variables that can play into that. So I'm not anticipating that the medical examiner's testimony is going to be this mic drop moment. I do think it's going to be troubling to listen to, because it is going to talk about the extent of the trauma and what the ultimate cause of death was. But I don't think they're going to have anything that's like, whoa, that really seals her fate. I don't think that's what's going to happen.
And again, look, I just had last Saturday, there was a savage murder in Bel Air, Maryland, and we were following the case, and there was just an arrest made. And I was talking with the family, still talking with the family, and they're just devastated, and the ripple effect of these victims' families. And no matter what side you take in this trial, the O'Keefes here are the victims, all of them. The parents are suffering. I mean, people are saying horrific things to the parents, which blows my mind. Paul O'Keefe, the brother, is suffering. I mean, the whole family is really going through hell. So let's keep them in mind, please. Darren Pullman says, I don't think the 227 is a big issue. Followed by Lori Ann here, Uncivil, who says, Jen did Google at 227. You'll see, even though the experts say no. What do you say about this 227 Haas long to die in the cold?
Yeah, I'm still waiting to hear more specifically on that issue. Obviously, this tab at least existed at 227 in the morning. So I'm curious as to alternative explanations on that issue.
Did you find the ones, I'm sorry to interrupt, but did you find the ones who already gave their testimony on behalf of the Commonwealth? Did you find them credible and knowledgeable?
I found it a little conclusory for my taste. I didn't find the reasoning as thorough as I would have liked to explain exactly how they drew those particular conclusions.
Okay. And so
but that was me.
What are you looking for? I mean, the defense is probably going to have a witness that explains it as well. What would you like to hear in terms of, conclusivity?
Well, I suppose I'd like to be able to understand something that would ideally categorically include it or categorically exclude it would be ideal. So it must be true that X, or it can't be true that X would be nice. But I didn't really personally get that sense from the testimony. I understood their conclusion, but I didn't quite understand the reasoning to be like, oh, this must be categorically true.
One of the other things that came up, and again, I'm not a mechanically or technologically inclined person, but I was trying to figure out the whole notion of key cycles. Counselor Loftus, view from Bob Smith, the key cycles show she wasn't driving the car at the time. It backed up 24 miles an hour. Katherine, there's a lot of debate about this, the car backing up. At what point? How did it hit her? The jurors have to be more aligned with me in terms of fairly limited understanding. How do you think they're going to perceive this? I mean, how was it from the way it was presented in court?
Well, I'm aligned with you as well because I have a fairly limited understanding of key cycles. And I think, as I mentioned before, the manner in which it was presented through Trooper Paul, who was the accident reconstructionist, it wasn't clear. And I think that just from what we have seen of the two witnesses from the defense that will have testify when they present their case, it's a little bit similar in a way when we see the Commonwealth present, ask their question on direct, and it feels a little foggy and you don't really understand, what am I looking for? How this, and then you have somebody like Alan Jackson get up and he kind of makes it a little bit easier to understand, simplifies it. And you look at the fact that why is the defense attorney simplifying things for the jury that the Commonwealth should be doing in the first place? And I think that's what's going to happen here is that we're going to get the defense experts, and because they present it most likely in a manner that's more simplified, easier to understand, they look more qualified, then a jury is probably more likely to believe their analysis. And who knows? I mean, I don't know anything about how vehicles work or car cycles, so I will be looking to people who are experts to see what they say. Will they say that the 24 miles an hour backing up is at a completely different location based on the mileage and all those things? I mean, that's what this is really all about.
From 2:30 to Rob D'Amico, this is your wheelhouse here, and I was coming to you with a question when I saw this comment. People are so passionate, Rob, about this in Massachusetts because Karen Reed can be any one of us. And if we can't go to the city or state police or the DA, who do we go to? Change is needed now. The feds, as you know very well, haven't been on the inside. They're very tight-lipped. We know there's an investigation into Trooper Proctor, whether there are other investigations, and I've been hearing rumblings of all sorts of things. I'm not even going to spread the rumor, but including people you would not expect to be included. And I was reading some of this stuff today. Bottom line with you, we heard from the governor, Maura Healey, say that she's basically disgusted by this. But what's going to happen after this trial when it comes to your old agency? Are they going to have to investigate the the Massachusetts State Police? Are they going to investigate the district attorney's office? Will they investigate this judge? Where will this go?
Well, I mean, you're not going to investigate a judge. I mean, that's just some judges do things certain ways. There's nothing there you're going to investigate. They may be investigating Proctor for different things, but it's not like, again, he's not going to be investigated by the FBI for being a horrible investigator. It just, that's not it. If they have something that he, like, if they really have facts that he planted evidence or something like that, you can get into some civil rights things. You can get into other investigations. But, the FBI just doesn't investigate police for being bad investigators. So you really have to look at what the investigation's about. And there's a bunch of politics in that. And unfortunately, with today and how we look at things and the information that we get, it is so hard to run an investigation where you don't have two sides of things. I mean, there's some out there that don't. This is obviously very personal. And if you look at this can happen to me is absolutely true. Like I said, I would rather put a guilty person back on the street than putting an innocent person in jail. That's probably that is not an active thought process in law enforcement. I don't think it is. Maybe, like I said, you have a number of years and you see things, but it's also on the political side. When you look at things like, I mean, that is Trump's whole thing. This can happen to anybody. And he has a base that says the same thing, and people are taking sides on it. It's funny that the head of NFL security is a friend of mine, and she is so worried about sports betting because every referee called is looked at. Well, did it throw the game? Is it on this side? And it's really hard to prove between a bad officiating or someone sees it and someone actually throwing something in there to get points and stuff. And it is really tough nowadays in any of these things to look at it on an objective basis on that. So there may be investigations. It's not going to be bad, but you're not going to investigate a judge for making poor decisions on the bench, for sustaining an objection or whatever. And you're definitely not going to investigate someone from the FBI for being a bad investigator. Massachusetts State Police may have an investigation to him for how he conducted the investigation and had some things go on, but that's not going to be the FBI investigation.
And D'Amico, now I know who to go to for my Dolphins tickets. So you'll be hearing from me.
I definitely know some folks out there. So let me know.
I thought you were going to say definitely not, but that's good to know. To Jen,
he's a fellow New Jersey guy, so
even better. Commonwealth case is more Jen McCabe's defense case in chief. Jennifer Roman, this is a super chat. Your response to that comment? A lot of people are saying that they're basically putting Jen McCabe on trial here. What do you think?
It does feel like she's been in the hot seat for sure, and I think her testimony was a bit defensive at times, and I think that was troublesome. I think that was a problem spot for the Commonwealth because she had a right to be upset. She had a right to say her family is being attacked by this and is feeling threatened and feeling unsafe, and but she was a little too defensive and a little too brusque, I thought, in some points of her testimony, particularly on cross.
Uncivil Law. I can't tell you the number of people here who say that you're genius level smart. Vince Didiana, by the way, my old friend, I've not seen him in I don't know how long. He's in the chat. He says he loves your stupendously sarcastic videos, but let's just pull way out here completely from a bird's eye view. What is it, in your opinion, since you're the apparent Einstein of law here, what is it, in your opinion, that has made this case what it is, so incredibly divisive? I mean, I think you can make the argument we have not seen this since O.J. Simpson, and I don't recall anything kind of close to it where it was so divided. I've seen people really anti-defendant or the other way around, but not where it's kind of split. And some people say this is not split down the middle, or way more people in favor of Karen Read's innocence. But what do you make of it? Why is it so divisive?
I mean, the only thing I could really point to objectively is the fact that it's a police officer that died, and that naturally causes us to have some special outrage for it. In many states, the murder of a police officer elevates the nature of the crime, right? It would elevate it from second degree to first degree, or it would make it a capital crime that an officer was murdered. So the very fact that it's a protector of the people, at least in principle, right? The police are there that are a protector, has been eliminated is perhaps a lot of it, I would think. And just the natural outrage of it. But, for me, and it could be because I'm looking at this through a legal lens, it's like, for me, I keep this simple. Within the specific context of the Commonwealth versus Reed, I don't know whether or not there's a conspiracy. I don't know whether there's a frame job. And to some degree, within the confines of the case, I strictly speaking don't care. The only thing I care about is whether or not the government has proven its case beyond a reasonable doubt. Or to put it slightly differently, do I have doubts based on reason? If I have doubts based on reason, there is only one possible conclusion. It must be not guilty. And I feel like I have many, many, many doubts based on reason for any number of things that we could talk about in detail. But I just feel like so many holes have been blown into this case. It feels like a sieve. And, there's nothing left for me. So it's, short of a miracle at this point, I feel like, how do you overcome all these doubts? And I just don't feel like it can be done.
Interesting take. No, my objection. I know I asked you a very similar question. I'm just curious from the panel why. I mean, you're up there in Massachusetts. You're a former ADA, and I get Kurt's point, but sadly, a lot of police officers are, either fallen and kind of centers of trials. So I'm not sure that is exactly what is causing this. Why do you think it is so incredibly divisive? Where right now in this chat, people are screaming at each other.
I think it's more indicative of where we are as a society today. I think if you're not here on the ground and for the past year, I mean, the division on this case, I mean, it's palpable when people talk about it all throughout Massachusetts, all along the South Shore. It's all anybody talks about. People are very entrenched in one side or the other. We look at our politics, the Democrats, the Republicans, you're not allowed to. Really, people feel like this, they have to pick a side and then they have to stick into that. And I do think when you look at a woman like Karen Reed, she's not the typical defendant. She's, middle upper class. She's educated. She's white. She, quite frankly, fits kind of the bill for this kind of story. It's why it's taken off. It's sort of why it's sensationalized. I think there's a lot of people who feel very fervently in her favor that you probably have been wronged by the system in some way. And so I think there is this feeling of validation for people who may have been in a similar position to how they perceive Karen Reed to be. And so they feel like it's as if it's them or if it could happen to them. And because they feel so personally about it, it's as if they're on trial. And that's how they act. That's how they engage. Nobody can really have civil discussions, like you said in your chat, or the fact that you have to, preface anything, you say that is likely going to go against what the mainstream says. It's an indication of where we are in our society today, that people can't have, discussions about things. And we should be able to say, listen, the Commonwealth believes this. They have a burden to prove that Karen Reed has every right to a fair and impartial trial. And let's talk about it. But instead, people just feel like, if you're on this team, the other side's my enemy, and vice versa. So it's interesting to be right in the middle of it. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. I'm going to go to Jennifer Roman with this one because she's running out of time here. I don't have to let her go in a few minutes. But lest you think we are not a global show, it is the future in Dubai, where it is ahead of us there by a bunch of hours. I am so sad and confused from Tina T. How this investigation was conducted. It's a police officer, but he was treated as garbage. Jennifer, it has been sort of conspicuous the way that, a lot of the witnesses who were with him that night did not refer to him even on the witness stand as a officer or a police officer. And typically there's a much greater response when an officer, a police officer, is injured or killed. Why do you think there was not a stronger response Even that night, it's important to remember that both Brian Albert and Brian Higgins, they were coming back from a memorial for a fallen NYPD officer. But why not send in, the troops, as it were, for an officer who was down?
I think this goes back to one of the primary themes of our discussion, is that the investigation was rushed. And some would say botched, right? A lot of people would say botched. And I think that some of the witnesses said it themselves. Some of the troopers said it. It was so clear that this is what happened. Okay, it might have been clear to you in the moment, but you still have an investigation to conduct, and you still have an obligation to make sure it's done in the proper manner. And so I think that that's part of it. I think that to them on the scene, it was so obvious that they kind of rushed it. And I don't think it was intentional disrespect to anybody involved in this. I think it's just how it played out. I also think to a lesser degree, however, that the fact that this isn't somebody who died in the line of duty. I think if he had been killed on the side of the road after a traffic stop of a vehicle, I think he would have been shown more respect. I think the fact that it happened in a casual setting sort of lessened people's response to him and to the fact that he was an officer. And frankly, I think that's unfortunate. I think he's the victim. Any victim deserves a certain level of respect and a degree of respect. And the fact that he was an officer here, I think, sort of warrants a higher degree of respect. But it's, I think those are really the primary two factors that sort of have caused people to be less deferential in a way to him, and to his role and his position.
Well stated there, and I would have to agree with you on a lot of those points. I know you have a meeting, so I don't want to keep you. I really appreciate you joining us, Jennifer, and being here. Jennifer Roman, Boston-based attorney who is also doing legal analysis for WBZ. Jen, I hope you'll come back maybe next week as this thing starts to wrap up.
Yeah, hopefully it wraps up soon. Thank you, everybody.
For all of us. All right, have a great night. From Tara Rayner here, too much deleted, missing, and butt dialing BS. If you believe what you're presenting, you don't need to deceive the jury. The Sally Port vids left by DA and Inverted should have tanked it. They left it overnight. I heard a chuckle there from Uncivil. But Uncivil, let me ask you a question. I'm playing devil's advocate. I'm a former journalist, still trying to be one in some capacity. But what about multiple witnesses saying, and this is, I'm talking from, I guess, how I would perceive this as a juror. There's so many moving parts in this particular trial, and I think a lot of them are complicated parts. They're sort of difficult to understand, and it's, I guess, sort of a variation on Occam's razor. But certain things, like in news, it's a simple soundbite that's going to stand out. And multiple witnesses said that they heard Karen Reed herself saying, "I hit him, I hit him, I hit him." Is that going to resonate with these jurors? Is that going to be something that sticks in their ear when they go into that deliberation room and maybe override some of the testimony that they've heard? Because there's just so much swirling around. What do you make of that?
I certainly think that's a possible thing that will stick in their head, but I also hope they will consider that other witnesses say that, she said other things, and to the degree the police heard it, they didn't put it in their initial reports. To the degree they heard it, the witnesses heard it, they didn't testify about it at the initial grand jury. So the statement about what they heard and when has not been recorded. It wasn't caught on any sort of body cam. So there's a lot of problems with that statement too. So, but and also even the state's witnesses, they described her as essentially being hysterical, which would make sense. It's her boyfriend who died. So if she's in that state, there's a pretty reasonable conclusion that she may have absolutely no clue what she was saying because she was in a hysterical state. So if you believe that she was just saying things as people do when they're hysterical, then there's no reason to credit it, even if you think she did say it.
Yeah, and there's also the fact that she may have been saying it as a question. Did I hit him? Did I hit him? Because she's in a confused state. So it's also the inflection. We don't really know what that is. Just since we're with you right now, Janet has a question for you. And the reason I brought up Judge Canonne as a possible target of investigation, there are, I don't want to perpetuate, but I guess I'm doing it right now. But on social media, there are rumors swirling that she's going to be looked at. Do you feel she is being biased? And there's familial relationships here. Kurt.
Oh yeah, I tend to think so. I make a point on my channel of saying judgment is not the same thing as biased, and just because the judge is always ruling one way or always ruling the other way, doesn't necessarily indicate bias. I mean, if the defense or the prosecution deserves to win 100% of the time, they deserve to win, and that's the right answer, right? So that's just proper scoring. So in order to determine bias, you really need to look at the delta between, your best judgment about what should be happening versus what is happening. And it's more of a systemic conclusion versus any one piece of things. So, based on various rulings, like, for example, just to bring a case in point, the way that she was sort of, in my mind, being somewhat dismissive of the defense's experts in a way that seemed quite aggressive, that the experts just seemed to be trying to find a particular word or phrase, and she seemed to come down on them in a particularly unfair way, especially if in comparison to the experts that the prosecution has apparently been allowed to offer, that she's expressing these levels of doubts about the defense's experts. When you look at it in the comparison, that is an exemplar of what I sort of think is more indicative of bias in its aggregated form.
Very well said. And now I know why they call you smart. So I have to Google 3 of the 4 words you use in your sentence. But
hey, Joel, I'd like to jump in on this again.
Please do, Rob.
I think some people have taken, like when I talked about, I don't agree with some of the judges' sustainments and objections and stuff. I don't get it. I don't know. But intent of those is so hard to prove. If there's evidence of some type of bias somehow, but that's going to be hard. Like that's something that has to come out. Again, if any agency is going to investigate something like that, there has to be evidence, and it's just not an internal bias that you can prove. Even if it's 100%, like she ruled on this side, that's not an investigation. That's an internal thought dialogue in someone's head that you can actually prove. There may be something else, but just if you don't agree with their opinion on certain things, and it's an internal bias, and some of it's not even a conscious bias, it could be, that's a different story. And it can be like, you can look at it and say 100% of the time she ruled in this way, it still has to be something outside of her just internal thought process that has to be investigated. So that's what I want to clear up, because some of your people just took it as like, oh, the FBI is never going to investigate a dirty judge. Not at all. But it's got to be more than just an internal bias because of relationships in the background.
I totally understand. So it's proven that intent, which obviously is going to, as you said, going to be something that's really difficult to prove. I want to get back to Rob on one thing, but let me, we haven't heard from Note my objection for a little bit. So getting to the voir dire from yesterday, Katherine, the judge, speaking to Judge Beverly Canonne, calls out a discovery violation by the defense as it pertained to Dr. Marie Russell, basically saying that they were late in the game with bringing her. And then Alan Jackson barked back saying that the prosecution of the Commonwealth has been very late with some of their witnesses. And then the judge, this was an interesting exchange, says to Alan Jackson, well, because Alan Jackson was talking about Jen McCabe, witnesses related and to Jen McCabe and herself. And the judge asked if Jen McCabe needs to be brought back as a witness, to which Alan Jackson responds, and I quote here, "I've done the damage that needs to be done to Jennifer McCabe." That's a very bold statement right there. The bigger question is here, and you just heard Uncivil Law talking about it, what is going to happen if Judge Beverly Canonne rules not to allow this witness testimony in from Dr. Marie Russell on behalf of the defense? Is there going to be even more outrage?
I think she's going to let her testify, and I think she's going to let the Commonwealth have a rebuttal expert if they want to call somebody. The interesting thing is it was a Rule 14 violation, and it's a legitimate violation. And I know people get frustrated. Well, this and that. We have to call each individual issue as it comes, right? So the expert was provided in late May, 6 weeks into trial. That's technically a discovery violation, and the court has to rule on it as it comes to them. I do think that if the Commonwealth really wanted it out, they probably should have just objected to even having a voir dire at all and arguing why the sanction was to completely exclude her. Because once she's on the stand and they were able to ask all the questions, the argument for not letting Dr. Russell testify as a sanction for the discovery violation is, well, we don't have time to prepare. We don't know what she's going to say. We don't have a report. But once they put her on the stand and you get all that up, it kind of remedies that problem and allows them time to prepare, which is why I think the judge asked, how much time do you need to be able to get an expert in rebuttal? So I do think she's going to allow her in. I think it was a legitimate line of questioning that she had that, what was the role in this person coming? And I don't know how many additional, if any, experts they have on top of Dr. Russell that will testify as to the arm injuries. But, the question is, you've had this case for 2 years. You don't have an expert about this before the middle of trial. And, she said that she reached out because she saw, a email blurb from the Boston Globe talking about the case. So there's a question about, inserting themselves. So whether she came to the case or to the defense with an opinion already before she even looked at any. So I do think there are legitimate questions for her as a witness, but ultimately I think she'll let her testify. The Commonwealth will have a rebuttal, and it will hopefully save some of the outrage.
Well, yeah, hopefully. So Dr. Marie Russell appears to be this one defense witness that is in question, but you just heard my objection, believing that she will be called. We're going to find out as soon as the judge makes a decision about it. Denise here saying, can you please ask each of the guests if she's guilty? I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to put them on the spot. But when we say goodbye today, I'll ask them, which way they think the verdict will go. I think that is a fair question because we should not involve their personal feelings unless they want to offer them up. David Gagamella from New Jersey, Rob D'Amico, our old neck of the woods. He says there are no injuries below the neck. How could it be a car injury? And you see Uncivil shaking his head. But Rob, you've been around many, many car injuries, people who are hit and killed or hit and badly injured. What do you make of that? Is it possible to get hit by a car in reverse at 24 miles an hour and not really have many sustained injuries below the neck? There are those injuries on his arm, of course.
I'll never say never. I mean, that's the one thing you learn about in any of these. Anything is possible. But if that is in fact what happened, then the reconstruction person, like what he explained happened, then just got totally decimated on cross-examination. So you needed someone to come in from the prosecution side and say, well, this is why there was no injuries below the neck, and why there was no broken bones, and this is how his cell phone ended up under him and his glass ended up here. And frankly, the prosecution's expert, reconstruction guy, was horrible. It was so bad that I don't think anyone in the jury is going to be able to say, oh yeah, that's how that injury, that death happens without any bruises below the neck, so to speak. So I don't think they had that person be able to come in. And I think when you get the defense experts that were being questioned today, they're going to be able to talk about a lot of other things and come off a lot better than the trooper did. And that's unfortunate. Like I said, I don't understand it, but I'll never say never, because I've seen so many odd things in accidents, everything from parachuting accidents to shooting accidents, that you just how does that happen? It does, but you have to have someone sit up there who has the right pedigree to explain physics and everything else, and to explain how this happened in this case. And I don't think that was done.
That was definitely not Trooper Paul. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Uncivil.
with Trooper Paul, it reminded me of a schoolboy called to the front of a class, trying to bluff his way through a book report of a book he never read. That was my overall feeling.
It very much felt that way. I have to admit, that's how it felt. He was squirming in his seat, and Detective Phil Waters, we have every Friday, has investigated over 400 homicides. He calls those ass wipes, where he's moving on the seat in a very uncomfortable position. So there were plenty of those when we watched Trooper Paul. From Tara Rayner here, she has a whole theory about what happened. I think John O'Keefe confronted Higgins for moving in on Karen. A fight started, booze, hot heads. Brian Albert gets in, and Chloe thinks her owner needs protection. John stood while bleeding, different clothes off, twisted. So there you go, is one theory, which a lot of people, I think, stand by. From Bo to Bob, back to Uncivil, is there any evidence that you've seen so far that points to Karen Reed's guilt?
Sure. I mean, if we're trying to get to probable cause, yeah, fine. I mean, as they said, if we take the state at its word about the DNA on the bumper, the hair on the bumper, that's some evidence that points to it. If we take the confession as a given, that's some evidence that points to it. So yeah, trying to find evidence that, causes you to suspect her, I think is fair. But there's a difference, of course, between the charging decision, where it's probable cause, which is basically nothing, versus what we're supposed to do by the time of end of trial, which is beyond reasonable doubt, which is quite a lot, different. I always sort of say on my channel that probable cause is kind of like 1 out of 10, and beyond reasonable doubt's like 9.5. And so it's like, do we have 1 out of 10? Sure, why not? Do we have 9.5? No, I have many doubts based on reasons. So yeah, there's some evidence, but I have reasonable doubts, and that's enough by law. So yeah. I'm there.
ADA Loftus, former ADA Loftus, from Anna M here. If his body's on the curb, how do we know it wasn't any of the neighbors that killed him? Why isn't anyone complaining why all the neighbors' houses weren't searched? I mean, it goes on and on and on. I mean, one of the big questions is, why didn't they go into the home? And I don't think there was probable cause to enter. I had another law enforcement officer on the other day who said they certainly should have knocked on the door at the very least. But I mean, how do you answer this? There's a million other things. They could have, gone to every house on the block. I have no idea. I mean, where do you end and where do you begin with this?
I actually agree with you that at the time of, on January 29th, I don't actually believe that there was probable cause for them to search the house. We do have police officers from the Canton PD who went inside the house. I think it was Lank and Sergeant Good who went in originally, and then might have been Gallagher after that. They went in. Good said he did a loop around. This is when they had the first initial conversations with Jennifer McCabe, Nicole Albert, Brian Albert. That's not to say that probable cause couldn't have been established. And I think that goes again to what I've been talking for a long time about, that personally, I have not been convinced of this big, giant, third party conspiracy. But the fact of the matter is that the police really had tunnel vision that day. They had a couple of statements. She hit him. One or two people say he didn't come in the house, and, she's got a broken taillight, and that's it. And they didn't do anything else really ever. They decided that day on January 29th that Karen Reed was guilty. And because of that, they didn't attempt to even look outside the box. So there's a world where maybe they could have established probable cause if they investigated further, if things came up. When Brian Higgins, although he voluntarily gave the text, those maybe should have raised a little bit of red flags to the police, given that, a couple of them said, hey, looks like you could have been a fight, could have been, a domestic, things like that.
Real quick from Adi Martinez, she's asking, I'm curious, a dead person outside the house, there's no probable cause with that? Rob's shaking his head no, but Catherine, why not?
No, because I think that this is why it's hard sometimes. I'm sure, as everybody on this panel knows, as people who are in the system understand what probable cause is. And you have to establish that there's a reasonable likelihood that there's evidence of a crime inside, that a crime is being committed or a crime has been committed. And when you have nobody, not a single solitary person saying that John O'Keefe went in the house, I don't know where you establish probable cause. And as I said, if you investigated a little bit further, maybe at that time, if they had gone down that road, they might have had somebody who said he went in the house, and then thereafter you have probable cause established. But if you don't, we'd be looking at it backwards saying they didn't have PC to enter the house, so it kind of goes both ways.
Yeah.
But they could have just asked to go in the house too.
That too.
Like you don't have to have a search warrant. You can say, hey, can I come in, take a look around?
But do you think it, from your perspective, as a former law enforcement, on a homicide and the potential homicide, the guys on the phone, do you really want a consent search? You probably, if you think that there's evidence inside, you probably would go down the line and freeze in the house and go in and get a search. Don't you think? I don't know. The defense attorney consent search is like, that's the questions all day.
I would go in and talk to them. Like I'd say, hey, let's get out of the cold.
But they did. But so there are 2 sergeants and a detective from Canton PD who do go in the house. So it's not like, I think people say, oh, they never went in the house. They actually did go in the house, and they let them in the house. So I don't know.
Back to the dog bite issue here, which is going to come up with this doctor, if her testimony is allowed, this Dr. Marie Russell. Cat's Pajamas says dog bites indicate to me something is off. So Dr. Marie Russell, who is this defense witness who went through the voir dire process yesterday, and we're waiting to find out if she's going to testify on behalf of the defense. She's an ER doctor on civil. She's also a former police officer and a forensic pathologist. Those are some pretty damn good credentials. She says she's seen hundreds of dog bites in her career, and she tells Alan Jackson the wounds on John O'Keefe's arm, and I quote here, appear to be consistent with an animal attack. They are consistent with a large dog attack, combination of bite wounds and scratches. One of the interesting things that comes to mind here is my friend Bob Mata, like a week ago, said he could have been laying on the front lawn and an animal, because there's a huge forested area next to the home, just a wild animal could have attacked him. And then I think people were circulating some surveillance video of raccoons and other animals walking around literally across the 34 Fairview Road. But 2 questions for you on civil. Apparently there's no dog DNA that is found on John O'Keefe, but she is going to come on and say it looks like a dog ripped his arm apart. How does a juror square that?
I don't know. Perhaps she has an answer to that question, or perhaps she doesn't. I couldn't really speak to what evidence she would have to answer that question, but perhaps there's an answer that makes sense. But she seems well qualified to be able to answer that question, presumably. So I feel, why not ask her and see if she has an answer, and if she doesn't, then the jury can deal with the conflict as they're dealing with other conflicts.
And I don't want to put you on the hot seat, but I mean, I don't know how much you actually practice law. I'm assuming quite a bit. And have you've seen injuries? What do you have any take yourself on what these injuries look like from your own perspective? Do they look like a car injury? Do they look like a animal injury? Does it look like a fight to you? Do you have any take on it?
No, this is not criminal, so I don't have a lot of experience in that domain.
In that domain, Rob D'Amico, you do. I think people have gone back and forth. Where do you stand today when you look at these autopsy photos? Again, you just heard Dr. Marie Russell, who is an ER doctor, a former police officer, and a forensic pathologist. She's going to make the argument, if allowed, that they do look like animal bites or dog. She says animal, not dog specifically. With the Commonwealth then have to come back on and say something along the lines of what Bob Mata is saying, which is, well, look, maybe a wild animal came and, chewed on his arm once he was already dead out there. What's going to happen? This is a problem if she says that they are animal bites, is it not, for the Commonwealth?
Yeah, I mean, it is a problem, but they also know what she's going to say, so they can start now, like, looking at, and I think the judge will allow her to say what she thinks it is, but not exclude those are not from a car accident. So I think the judge will keep her in her area of expertise, saying, okay, it's, she's this expert. She's proven she's an expert in being able to talk about animal bites and scratches and stuff, and she can testify to that. Again, I think you always have to side on the error of it's someone's freedom we're talking about. And if there's a witness who has information, there's oddities in it. Like, how did she get involved in this? Is she like surviving the survivor fanatic, and she saw like us talking about it, and she has to get involved? Or is it something happened, she looked at it and said, hey, wait a second, I have an expertise in this. This is what it looks like. But I don't think she'll be able to exclude car accidents. That gives a prosecution the side, say, well, yes, they can then start to find an expert to say otherwise. And then they can, on cross, say, but you can't tell me that this wasn't from a car accident. You're just saying it looks like this. So, I mean, it's a game. And again, we talk about the level of evidence and who's presenting it and how they come across to the jury and what the jury believes. And when they go into that room, that's what they're taking with them. And there's some oddities in how people believe things. Just look at all the comments on this feed about who believes what and how they see people testifying in what they say based on their perception. You go into books like Blink and everything else like that, and how people come across on a very, very basis. And again, sometimes if you look at if you read the transcript as opposed to seeing someone talk and how they come across and how you connect with them, that's what the jury's about. That's really what's going in there.
Kristen here with a super chat for ADA Loftus, and this is a good question. Katherine, would you walk through some potential lesser included charges the Commonwealth might seek? What must the Commonwealth prove on those charges, and which one is Karen Read most susceptible to for conviction?
So she's also charged. So she's charged with second-degree murder. So they need to prove intent there, and that's the one that everybody's hung up on because there doesn't seem any evidence of intent from what I have seen so far. The second charge she has is manslaughter while driving under the influence. Basically, all they have to prove with that, to simplify it, is that she was intoxicated and acted negligently or recklessly. I mean, it's about as easy as it comes, right? Because I think there's clear evidence of at least some level of intoxication. And then the lowest charge she has is leaving the scene of personal injury or serious bodily injury, which basically they would need to show that she knew she hit him or that he was there injured and that she left the scene. I think the biggest one she's susceptible to is the manslaughter. I do think there's a world in which she could be found. If she was found guilty of anything, it would be the manslaughter. It's never going to be second degree. There's no possibility of that from my perspective. I think there's a very small chance she could be convicted of the manslaughter. Most likely she's probably going to be found not guilty. But I think that's the one. What I see oftentimes, as we're talking about this case, is people say, I think there's a really good chance she was just drunk and hit him and might not have known. That's the response I get a lot, but I'm not seeing this intent from the Commonwealth. So, I have said from the very beginning of this case that she was overcharged. It's likely because it's in Norfolk County. For people who are not familiar with Massachusetts, I practiced largely in Suffolk County. That's where I was a DA. She never would have been charged, I don't think, with second degree murder if she was in Suffolk County. But some of these, like the more suburban counties, they tend to overcharge and then plea them down. So, I think that's likely what was happening here. And it probably was a fatal error for the Commonwealth.
Yeah, and I think the consensus is the case was overcharged, and I've heard what Katherine is saying. If there's any sort of conviction, it'd be on the lesser charges of possibly involuntary manslaughter. Suey, Generous, Shane here. To
Nice.
Rob D'Amico, we'll go back the other way around. I've got a couple questions for Uncivil before we go, and then we'll start to wrap. But how did the injury, Rob, on the back of the head happen? That is a nasty gash. I think you'd have to be in that house to know exactly. I think you have to be there to know the answer to any of these questions. But that looks, Rob, like you could fall back, smack your head, and that could come from a number of ways of it happening.
I think that injury is so common with someone just falling back, and it could be slipping on ice. It could be stairs are icy. It could be, he got hit and he fell back. I told you, I think the last episode, I cracked the back of my head open, riding down Osborne Terrace with no brakes, hit a curb, flipped over, depressed fracture on my skull. I probably was like 12 years old, maybe less. And the blood was just unbelievable. But anything like when you slip back and you're, especially if you're, you can't get your hand back to stop that, especially a curb, if it's up, or you're slipping back. So I don't think that the injury itself points to anything. Like it can come from a fight and he fell back. It can come from getting hit by a car. And I think like if he was hit in the right way, that his head was forward, that way you don't have bruises below your neck and then you fall back on a curb, that could happen too. But again, there's no one coming in with the proper, I think, bona fides to say, this is how it happened. It'll be interesting to see what the medical examiner says, but if he says he fell from loss of blood and the cold, I still don't think it proves either way. It's just one of those things that you're not going to get over and say, how did the cut in the back of the head happen? It could happen like 5 different ways in that situation, and 2 of them are what the defense says and what the prosecution says.
And it is not just a tagline here at STS. We've got the best guests in true crime. Put up our roster against anyone's. If you are enjoying the show, please subscribe. Please hit that like button. You're going to get Uncivil Law back on the show with ADA Loftus and Rob D'Amico. If you like them, please hit the subscribe button. One of the other defense witnesses who was going through the voir dire process yesterday, guy named Daniel Wolf. He is an accident reconstructionist. This is one of the experts that the feds hired to actually the FBI did to do an accident reconstruction on this case. In March, he was quoted as saying, this potential witness, the damage on the car was inconsistent with having made contact with John O'Keefe's body. In other words, the car didn't hit him, and he wasn't hit. This is according to Alan. This is Alan Jackson, I should say, paraphrasing the witness testimony. So this is Alan Jackson. The damage on the car was inconsistent with having made contact with John O'Keefe's body. In other words, the car didn't hit him, and he wasn't hit by the car, period, full stop. Uncivil to you, obviously this would be incredibly important testimony if they have this witness. There's been a lot of discussion on the Twitter spheres and on the social media spheres about the ethics of bringing on a witness that was hired by the feds. Is there any problem with this?
I mean, I can't see any reason why. If anything, it seems even better because it's not hired by either party. They're a neutral party. They're just coming in without being paid or even really solicited by either party. So I can't really see a fundamental problem if the feds want to allow the person to testify, if the feds are cool with it, and the person's offering an opinion and has the expertise and training, all the rest of it. I can't see a fundamental problem with it.
Some interesting tweets that I check out the tweets on the daily here revolving around this case. A woman named Lisa Perot, who apparently has a lot of experience with dogs. Rob D'Amico, back to you on this because I'm fascinated by these marks on the arm. She tweets, there is a very big difference between the attack of a dog, be the dog trained, a bully breed, or a nervy dog. This is why all bites look different. All attacks look different. In the case of this case where the dog was bred would even matter. Is it a pusher or a puller? I find that really fascinating. Rob, you're smiling, but this is something I would have no idea about till reading this tweet. In other words, are dog bites like snowflakes? No two are alike. They all look different.
They are. I laugh because over in Iraq and Afghanistan, we the special ops guys use a lot of dogs, and some of them would lose teeth, and they would insert serrated titanium teeth on these dogs, and those bite wounds were horrific. I also know a sniper that was about to take a shot, and our own dog came up and bit him in the butt, and he was pretty proud of a couple, 4 puncture wounds in his butt. He still got the shot off. Everything is, like I said, you go push, pull, like, was this like what in fact happened with the dog? All these people coming in saying, oh, I'm an expert in dog bites and stuff like that. They're all different. They're like, they're all going to come around and look different, and everyone's going to view them differently. You got to get someone, if you're in trial, you have to get someone up there that can explain what you're seeing in a way that the jury believes it, that they're going to take that back over some of the other evidence. That's what this is about. And you're going to find hundreds of opinions on each side. And it is the ability to go up and talk to the jury and explain things in a way that they understand and that they believe you, that is over the other side's evidence of it being something else.
ADA Loftus, how would you rebut this if, let's say, Alan Jackson said, look, there's Vicky's asking why no blood on any taillight piece. You're the Commonwealth. Jackson says there's no blood on any taillight piece. What is your rebuttal to that?
Well, first to clarify, I'm not an ADA. I've been out of the DA's office since about 2017, but lots of people like to say I'm more pro-prosecution. I call the balls and strikes on both sides. Well, I think that, if there's no blood on the taillight, there's no blood on the taillight. We shouldn't have the Commonwealth creating a theory as to why there's not blood on the taillight. Everything is different. Every car accident is different. Every hit is different. Every fight is different. And I don't think the lack of something shouldn't automatically be explained with, an explanation. It might just be, we don't know. And because we don't know, whatever weight the jury wants to give the fact that there's not blood on the taillight, they give it. I don't know what the Commonwealth's explanation would be unless they had evidence of it, which I imagine if they had an expert that said, that wasn't true for Paul, respectfully, but if they had an expert that said, this is why, we traditionally don't see blood on a taillight if someone's struck, but absent that, it would just be the Commonwealth, speculating as to why. So I think if you don't have a reasonable explanation, you have to leave it.
This is a great point by 2:30. This is a polycarbonate taillight, Rob D'Amico. They're not supposed to shatter. This shattered into 45 pieces. Is it possible? Don't send me the hate mail. I'm asking a question innocently. Is it possible, because it was so cold out that night, there was a different sort of reaction, or would that have no impact at all? Oh, you're muted, Rob.
I'm muted. I think it could, but again, if I was a prosecution and I thought that this was a hurdle that was going to be hard to get over, I would find an area where I could bring that car down to a temperature and try to prove that it cracks in that many positions. I think a bigger thing to overcome is how come the first guy in the scene found small pieces of taillight, and then all of a sudden the troopers that were told, hey, on your way to work, drive by and see if you see any more evidence, found huge pieces of taillight. I think that's a bigger hurdle to get over than the number of pieces. Because but again, if I'm the prosecution and I have something like that, like normally this isn't supposed to break like this, but it did. When you get down to a certain temperature, things do things differently. I can go into a story about how the Japanese, we test aircraft glass by shooting turkeys out of an air cannon at aircraft. And I know this as a sniper from the FBI because I'd have to shoot through cockpit glass. And the Japanese were testing it on go-fast trains, and they kept saying, we're breaking the glass, we're breaking the glass. So they had the NTSB folks come over, and they shot the turkey, and it went right through the entire train. And then the NTSB guy goes up, and he picks up the turkey, goes, your turkey's frozen. We don't shoot frozen turkeys. Because but again, so when you go into it, things happen at different temperatures. But if I think it's an issue, then I have to test for it to be able to try to explain that away.
Every time Rob emasculates me on the show, talking about sniping, being a sniper through what was that? Would you say it was the
cockpit glass?
Yeah, cockpit glass. Yeah, I've never shot someone through cockpit glass. Uncivil to you, any comments about this taillight? It looked like you were nodding your head in agreement with Rob D'Amico.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree. It's like you probably want to test it, and you probably don't even need to be honest. You could probably just call Lexus and ask them. I'm willing to bet from their internal testing for NHTSA and various other countries' compliance, they might have an answer. Or NHTSA, you could ask them. Maybe they have an answer because they've seen a lot of things. Who knows? But either way, it would be helpful to be able to make a determination as to this. And I'm also with the earlier issue of how did we only find, a couple pieces of glass, or the plastic of the thing, how we only find a couple pieces. And later we found really big pieces. Was it during our initial search, we didn't have enough leaf blowers and brooms? Was that the problem? Because I'm willing to hear the answer to that one too.
By the way, Jimmy McNutty's been a trial watcher. I'm sorry, Catherine, real quick. He's been a trial watcher since the early 90s. He is of the belief that Karen Read is guilty. And he says here, the McCabe's Yukon XL, I'm bringing up his comment so he gets the hate mail, not me, could have crushed the taillight, fire trucks, and people walking on the scene at 6 a.m. Many ways to break the plastic. Go ahead, former ADA Loftus.
No, I was just interesting because it's all about the pieces at 34 Fairview. And I do think it's something that we talked a lot about the weather in the Commonwealth case for a while, but I think it's important to remember there were like 20 inches by the time, not in the morning at 6:30. There was, it was blizzardly and snowing, but most of the testimony that came out later during the day, 10, 11, 12 o'clock, it was 10, 15 inches at the time. We're talking about streets. So there's, heaps of snow on the sides for people who live where there's a lot of snow. And so I do think that there's a lot of questions about why it goes back to the police investigation, right? Because if they had secured the scene at 6:30 a.m., roped it off, stationed a trooper there or a Canton PD and said, don't let anybody touch it, then they wouldn't have gotten the plowed snow. So to me, it doesn't negate that actually could be there and could have been there the whole time, but that they didn't secure it allows all these questions to come in, which is ultimately why the flawed investigation is so strong for the defense, because there's just like problem after problem after problem.
The reasonable doubt is off the charts. That seems to be the consensus in the chat. What is not in doubt is that I wrote a book about my mother. She's a child Holocaust survivor and the co-host of this very show, and she's turning 85. She and I are going to be signing some books tonight at the Citadel in Miami. It's a very late notice kind of thing. Maybe I'll get Carm drunk. I'll have her have a sip of wine, and that'll do the job. But if you need a distraction from Karen Read, it's actually a book that'll make you laugh, cry, and it's a Holocaust story, but it'll still make you laugh, cry, and think you're normal after you read it compared to the Waldman family. But it sheds a lot of interesting light on life. It's my mom's perspective on everything from marriage to kids to her son. To podcasting as being one of the oldest podcasters. The book, it's easy to remember. It's the same title as this podcast, Surviving the Survivor. And if the COE was now getting some drinks with her friends, I put up the book cover, but I don't have it. But you can find it on Amazon or anywhere books are sold. And we are continuing the book tour, coming to Chicago July 16th. They're going to be back in Miami July 25th. This weekend, this Sunday in Tampa, at a place called the Oxford Exchange, 3:30 on Sunday, and appreciate all the support. It is, as I say, the most important story I've ever reported on. It is so important for me to get her story out there, especially in light of the way the world is these days. Too many people fighting. So please pick up a copy of the book. You'll enjoy it. I want to thank our esteemed panel here. Jennifer Roman was with us for the first 45 minutes. She does legal analysis for WBZ up in Boston. Thank you to her. Rob D'Amico, he served his country for 39 years. He's a man's man. He's shooting guns and bullets through cockpit windows. He's chasing pirates through Somalia while I am getting manicures or pedicures. And I haven't been doing that, but close. Rob D'Amico, I promised I would ask, how do you think this verdict is handed down or handed in? I always forget if it's up, down, or whatever with the verdict, but we're going to see a guilty, not guilty, an acquittal. What do you think? Oh, you're muted. Oh, did he just freeze?
I think at this point, if I was on the jury, I'd say not guilty. I'd say that they haven't reached that what I think they need to reach. There's a show on Apple TV, Presumed Innocent, just started.
Great show.
Watch the first couple minutes of it, because it's the prosecutor talking about, like, if you think this happened, that's not enough. If you really think it happened, it's not enough. It's my job. It is my job to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that this person committed this crime. And I don't think they're there yet. It's one of those things that we have a great justice system because that is the extent of it. The burden is on the prosecution. You're going to take away someone's freedom and you're going to put them in jail or find them guilty. That's the threshold. And any cop, and some people I saw in there said they felt sorry for the trooper. Don't feel sorry for him. He is there. He's doing a job and he's testifying about taking away someone's freedom. He has to be really, really good in order to do that. I'm sorry if he didn't cut the mustard, if he got embarrassed on things that the defense was asking him about. It's based on him testifying about what he says happened. And if he doesn't have that pedigree to do it, then he shouldn't be doing it. That's my opinion.
Holly, by golly, love this show. But Joel, please let your guests talk more. I promise tomorrow night's show. I'm heading to Tampa tomorrow with Carm and the kids. I will come with duct tape over my mouth. I will say hello and let the guests talk the rest of the way through. This is my life now. I love you, Holly, by golly. It's not your fault. It's just my life. I've chosen it. Every single person yells at me about something or other. Uncivil Law, he never gets yelled at. You ever get hate mail on civil law?
Sometimes.
You do. And how do you respond to that hate mail on civil?
It's been interesting at times.
Do you respond?
Historically, I have, but I'm getting better about not doing it as much because, as they say, it's impossible to please everyone all the time. And so, to some degree, you just kind of have to give up and just look to the majority consensus and hope for the best. But I agree with the idea that the standard is proof beyond a reasonable doubt. It's not enough to think that there's evidence. It's not enough to even think. It's more likely than not. That's not the right standard. The standard is proof beyond a reasonable doubt. It's supposed to be a very high standard. And if the state were to rest right now, I think that you would actually be required to enter a directed verdict of not guilty, because I'm at the point where I don't think a reasonable jury, given what we know right now, could convict. I think there's a 5% base chance the jury will convict, just because that's a base chance, just because the defendant's sitting there. There's a 5% chance they'll convict, but I think it would be legal error at this point.
And that is coming from Uncivil Law Kurt Mueller. He's a Houston-based attorney with the YouTube channel Uncivil Law. Please follow him, subscribe to him. A rising tide lifts all ships. It is guilty, not guilty, or possible hung jury here. Former ADA Loftus, what say you? Thank you to Katherine Loftus. She's now a defense attorney with Loftus and Loftus. Is the other Loftus your husband, by the way?
It's my dad.
Oh, it's your dad. Even better. Even better.
Yeah.
Do you run the show, or does your dad run the show?
Depends on who you ask, Joel.
I have a feeling it's you. Say hello to your dad. We need to get your dad on this show.
Yeah, he's good. He's recovering from open heart surgery and he's doing great. So I'm your doc.
Send him our best wishes for a quick recovery. So guilty, not guilty, hung jury. What say you?
I think unless the Commonwealth has some sort of wow moment in the next couple of witnesses, it's pretty likely to be a not guilty. Like we've heard, there's always the chance. And one thing I know as an attorney, both as a prosecutor and defense attorney, sometimes you never know what's going to happen. It can go completely the opposite way of what you think. But I think given that in Massachusetts, we actually have a really, really strong reasonable doubt instruction. It's basically the last thing that the judge reads to the jury and advises them that they have to find somebody guilty beyond a reasonable doubt to a moral certainty. And, every time you hear that as a prosecutor read to the jury, you go, oh, because, the standard is pretty high. And I think in all likelihood, it's probably going to be a not guilty. But, I will save my formal opinion until the close of all the evidence.
And in all likelihood, we could very well get the medical examiner tomorrow, and the Commonwealth could wrap its case as soon as tomorrow afternoon. We're going to be live tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Eastern time from an undisclosed location underground in Tampa. Please watch us then. Until then, love you, America. Love you, Boston, Mass. Love you, New Jersey and Florida and Houston, Texas. And please, let's remember Officer John O'Keefe. See you next time, everybody.